So, good evening, everyone, and welcome to another special guest episode on the Institute for Natural Philosophy. We are very grateful today because we have none other than Aaron Vooght, a new author with several books published with a very interesting perspective about the ancient world. So, let me introduce Guy, who will present this special guest episode with me. And my first question to you, Aaron, and thank you very much for coming, Rick. Sorry. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you became intricately interested in the psychotropic aspect of ancient history.
Absolutely. In fairness, the psychotropic element, it was kind of delivered to me a little bit later on. Kind of fell in my lap after watching a documentary called The Spirit Molecule, presented by Joe Rogan and Dr. Rick Strassman. Excuse me. Based around Dr. Rick Strassman's volunteer recruiters, I guess, for DMT, also known as N,N-dimethyltryptamine, which we find in the human brain, eyes, lungs, cerebral spinal fluid. And as I say, in fairness, I kind of grew up in the 1990s with the rave scene and what have you, and I was kind of privy to most consciousness altering substances, but DMT had never really kind of hit my radar until probably only about 15 years or so ago now, around 2010, 2011. But yeah, prior to that, I've always had a deep interest in research that's, I guess, almost been compartmentalized somewhat by Graham Hancock with regards to an alternative timeline of human history, and a narrative that seems to be getting somewhat broader the more people like myself, yourselves, and other extremely relevant new age researchers that really appear to be kind of pushing the boundaries back from what the timeline of humanity may or may not be. We may be right, we may be wrong, but at the moment there doesn't seem to be kind of any sort of happy medium or equilibrium where the archaeologists want to have a conversation with people like myself. They're quite happy kind of throwing the baby out with the bathwater, if you know what I mean. If we don't have letters or ologies or what have you behind our name, then they're not interested, which is a real shame. It's a real shame. And as I say, it was Graham Hancock's book that initially got me tiptoeing along this path back in the mid to late 1990s with his publication Fingerprints of the Gods. And I guess from there, I must have read literally hundreds of books regarding an alternative narrative to what we've been told, or even spoon-fed, you could say. And a lot of what the archaeologists are saying is bang on the money. They're not wrong about most of the stuff they're talking about, but they appear to not want to have the conversation that may potentially, I guess, be the last brick in the dam with regards to a fundamental understanding or an overlap. I don't know, like almost like a waterfall of information that the ancients have left us to almost read between the lines of an allegorical, I guess, artwork, really. And it's forever fascinated me. It's intrigued me. I'm a curious mind. Again, I'm not a recognized archaeologist, chemist, biologist, physicist, or what have you. I'm just extremely curious, always have been. And I wanted to enter the arena and kind of join that kind of Hancock-esque lost civilization conversation. But like a lot of researchers, even today, they're kind of not regurgitating, but churning out research that we're already aware of, you know, like your Hancock, your Von Daniken, your John Anthony West, Bill Donahue. I mean, the list is as long as your arm, you know.
Sure.
But yeah, again, I had no real kind of, I wanted to bring something new to the arena. And I didn't know what that was because, as I say, I would just be parroting extremely thorough research, but I wanted to have my own kind of bargaining chip to bring to the table, if you know what I mean. And it wasn't until I watched the Spirit Molecule documentary, which I mentioned a moment ago, via Strassman and Rogan, that literally my life changed in a heartbeat. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I couldn't believe what this consciousness altering chemical that we produce in the human brain, that's littered throughout the animal kingdom, throughout the botanical kingdom as well, and it's been demonized for so many years, for decades. And like I say, I thought I was privy to most consciousness altering chemical compounds sort of growing up in the 90s. But wow, did my worldview shift when I started to gather an understanding of what DMT may or may not be, regarding a key to maybe picking a lock in our brains, in our minds, with regards to opening up a whole new world of, I guess, cosmic understanding with regards to, loose air quotes, machine elves, your entities, your deities, or whatever we may or may not be communing with when we actually have a breakthrough dose of DMT. There appears to be very large question marks over why this has been made so illicit, why it's been demonized for so long, when we produce this chemical endogenously. You know, we might not actually witness this entire three-dimensional reality that we call life without this puzzle piece, DMT, being produced in our brains and our bodies. And again, I found it absolutely fascinating when this documentary kind of blew up in my face, I guess. And when I had no idea what the makeup or the identity or the molecular structure of what this chemical compound looked like. As I say, prior to this documentary, I knew nothing, less than nothing, you know. I don't claim to, again, loose air quotes, know a great deal about it. I don't think anyone that says they know exactly what DMT may or may not be, I think they kind of I think they're probably shooting from the hip and really not maybe understanding the words that are even coming out of their mouth, because anyone that has a breakthrough dose of DMT with regards to coming back from an 8-minute excursion, which feels anything like from the initial 8 minutes to even months, years, or millennia's worth of understanding about the nuts and bolts of what reality may actually be, what these entities may or may not actually be. I think that, I would have to say that they don't know what they're talking about if anyone literally wants to put a stamp of authority on, especially society, saying this is no good, it's illicit, it's a psychoactive chemical compound, we don't want you to touch it. For me, I find that extremely frustrating. And with regards to what I believe I now have a loose understanding of regarding ancient Egyptian mythology and a plethora of ancient and new world religions and cultures globally, it appears to come back to the same fundamental understanding of a tree of life, which would, for all intents and purposes, come back to a variety known as the acacia, which rather unexpectedly now, after my research, I find that acacia is probably one of the single most potent varieties of botanical variety that we can actually isolate this chemical compound, extract it, and then ingest it past the blood-brain barrier to elevate human consciousness to a level that is, I guess, probably an unlimited amount of mind-blown emojis on a text, you know, because you can't compartmentalize this. Anyone that kind of comes back from this experience and says, dude, I get it, they're lying, you know. But again, with regards to the myth of Osiris, when I realized what this chemical looked like, when I understood where it came from, when I understood that it was inside ourselves, when I learned that for all intents and purposes, it not only shatters your worldview, but we've all heard of like a Kundalini experience where you have like an ego death. But this particular, I guess, mini death, because DMT essentially does trick the brain into a death-like state of mind, and it's absolutely terrifying. It's unfathomably terrifying at first, and you genuinely believe that you are dying. And it's only when you hit a certain degree of this chemical compound passing the blood-brain barrier where everything in a heartbeat changes, then all of a sudden you're in this 5-dimensional, 6-dimensional, 7 multi-dimensional plane of existence that's just absolutely incomprehensible, that seems to be littered and teeming with sentient beings that not only recognize you, but they appear familiar to you as well, you know. And yeah, it's absolutely mind-blowing. It's absolutely mind-blowing. And to try and compartmentalize a breakthrough experience on DMT in today's culture and language, I don't think that we've even evolved enough to kind of explain these type of experiences. But I do genuinely believe now that there's an ancient understanding that someone somewhere worked out what this had to do with the human experience and kind of built almost a bulletproof story or mythology where a scientifically savvy society like ourselves in the 21st century could actually learn to read between the lines and say, hey, there's something extremely profound about what these guys are trying to tell us, if indeed I'm reading the myth correctly. But obviously would like to get into conversation further down the line where I can kind of like connect a few dots and make it a little bit more understandable. But again, I didn't know where I was going to get time to even build a book, have the time to talk to people like yourselves and have these wonderful opportunities to talk about my research. It wasn't until my colleagues working in South America, I was working for the European Space Agency, overseeing the launch of Ariane 5 spacecraft for the UK government. Mm-hmm. And my friends would say to me that I was working when the technicians weren't working on the spacecraft. We would have these conversations and they would say to me, dude, you have to write this down. You have to put this out into the world, whether you're right or wrong. Let's get this conversation going. And because we're working 12-hour shifts in the middle of the jungle, it was nigh on impossible for that to happen. But I kind of take positives out of every negative in my life, and I actually fell quite some way and basically broke my back from a launch pad in the jungle, and I was flown home within sort of 48 hours.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was kind of rather tragic, to be honest, because it was the greatest job that I've ever had. And yeah, I was in a world of pain. I spent probably 5 or 6 years being misdiagnosed, saying a lot of this was sort of psychological in my brain and what have you. I got a third, fourth, and fifth, excuse me, surgeon actually looking at what my problem may or may not be, to find out that I'd actually been walking around for the past 5 or 6 years with a broken back. And it wasn't until then, when I had my spine fused, a number of other surgeries just to make sure that I was going to be able to walk after I learned to walk again, the recovery time was there for me to either feel sorry for myself and kind of watch daytime TV, or grab the proverbial bull by the horns and say, right, it's time to draft a manuscript. And yeah, that's what I've done over the course of a couple of years. And yeah, my best friend at the time was an editor, and he actually said to me, look, where do you want this to go? What's your kind of end game for this research? And I just said, in all fairness, Adam, my end game is to, everyone wants to kind of change the world a little for someone somewhere, you know. And if my research manages to change the world even for one person for the better, then I will feel eternally uplifted, you know. But how am I going to get this message out there? And I actually said to my editor, it would be wonderful if someone of such stature and esteem, and someone that I hold in such high regard, like Graham Hancock, could actually be privy to this kind of understanding, because I'm sure you guys know that he's written about ancient civilizations, he's written about chemical compounds, and I thought this is going to be right up sort of Graham Street, you know. How am I going to make this happen? But yeah, literally 2 or 3 months after publishing The Spirit in the Sky, Ancient Cosmological Gods and Where in the World We Find Them, yeah, I was literally bowled over to receive an email from Graham's team saying that we're privy to the book, we're privy to the research, and we'd like to promote it on the website. So yeah, it literally, it was like a dream come true, being offered a month from Graham Hancock's website. And the rest, I guess, is history. I genuinely believed that this particular publication would be like a microphone drop, and I kind of walk away and see how it got on. But yeah, how wrong could I be? It seemed that the deeper I went down into this particular rabbit hole, the deeper it kind of went, you know. And then friends, colleagues, and other researchers would be emailing me like almost daily saying, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Maybe this connects. And then before you know what's going on there, they become, even like yourself, Ricardo, you know, you've got pieces of this, again, proverbial puzzle that tend to fit into the bigger picture of other researchers that may or may not be talking to each other, but we all seem to be kind of talking off the same proverbial hymn sheet. And I believe that people like yourselves are doing a marvelous job in trying to promote this bigger picture on who we are, where we come from, and yeah, maybe what our potential is as a species. And I find it eternally fascinating.
It is. And all you said, I have a question that I have to ask first. That is, do you think that the same way that the vine is used to allow the actual compound on ayahuasca to be digested and thus make a prolonged effect, do you think in the case of DMT, since we biologically produce it internally, do you think that can be tuned to, the body can be tuned to a frequency that increases in the natural production of DMT on the body? Have you read anything about it? Have you researched anything about it? Just something that came to my mind.
No, I think that's absolutely the case. Absolutely the case. And you talk about frequency. Realistically, I mean, yeah, everything that makes me whole and makes me a human being feels like it feels solid. But I mean, we won't go down this particular rabbit hole at the moment, but I'm sure you're extremely aware that we're essentially 99.9% empty space that's just molecules vibrating so fast on a frequency that it kind of gives us this overriding feeling of, I guess, this is, yeah, that's my laptop, there's my wall, here's my chair, here's my hands, you know.
When we can't actually touch anything. Yes,
exactly. And I think frequency has a large part to do with this whole thing, this whole overriding cosmology.
I was reading here and says there is some a paper that speaks about measuring frequency in people under the influence of DMT, so the brain frequency, and they say that these results indicate that DMT induces a general decrease in total power across all frequency bands between 1 and 30 hertz. However, there is a transient normalization increases in theta and delta frequencies at the time of peak subjective intensity, which is especially evident in the oscillatory component of the signal. So these low frequencies seem to be blocked. And so could it be that the veil that it's open in order to we can actually experience the other reality that is no less real because of it.
Yeah.
And yeah, my question is, do you think that these sites that we see all over the world that are purposely built with frequency in mind, with sound modulation, with standing waves production, and so on, according to each use, do you think that in Egypt, where you see that myth so prevalent, that the evidences that you gather, the circumstantial evidence, let's call them like that,
Sure.
do you think that those sites, or have them been studied in that way, do you think that those sites are built to intensify the influence or the effectiveness or the result of the experience under the DMT? That's my question.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I think it's going to be something that won't be proved anytime soon. But yeah, there's oh man, I wish I could wish it. I might even have the book here. There's a gentleman that has written a book. I literally moved into this place 3 weeks ago, and I don't have everything where I need it to be. There we go. If you haven't read by David Elkington, The Ancient Language of Sacred Sound.
Yeah, let me write that down.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The gentleman's talking about how syllables and verbs in a plethora of cultures have been built into the acoustics of a lot of these temples that we find throughout antiquity, and a lot of it comes back down again to resonance and frequency, i.e. I'm sure you're aware of cymatics and like the church windows and what have you. And for all intents and purposes, when you have people singing at certain frequencies within an atmosphere that's, I guess the acoustics are actually built for this purpose. I'm not a religious person, but I can understand where people would feel, call it closer to God or an elevation of consciousness in a church type environment when you have the choir singing.
Yeah, but that's intentional. That's completely intentional from the beginning.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I genuinely believe that the guys that were building these structures in the Renaissance period and prior were building off a template or an understanding of what these acoustics and harmonics and temples that our ancestors of millennia before were trying to, I guess there's a pun here, but preach towards what this can do for human consciousness and the elevation of it therein.
That's why they build right on top of those ancient structures, because the location is quite important. It's not only to fool the people that is the same sacred ground with a different face, but they also made use of those same ancient technologies, let's call it, to their own purposes. You talk about cymatics. Have you seen that? If you go to ancient churches, specifically those that are located on specific telluric current strong points, with underwater movement of or underground movement of water, you see these basins that they call it the baptismal basins. When they are not placed in a wall, because some are touched to the wall, those doesn't matter. But those that are standing alone on the aisle are a cymatic instrument, because once you put the sound into it, for instance, if you have Bach that composed specifically to cause that effect on churches, it was he was famous exactly for knowing that mathematical musical language that could resonate with the cathedrals. When he was making the music, there was someone with that basin filled with water, seeing the patterns that the church was making, so that they know through the patterns if they are getting the right frequency that will influence others into that sensation of divine, of contact with something higher. For instance, Guy, can you remind us the tale of the cathedral of Alatri, the influence, the fact that it was completely absorbed in this kind of energy?
It's kind of
I'm going to try and pick up the energy while you speak.
Sure, it's kind of like it's kind of a magnetic frequency field, if you could say so. Essentially, the whole town was had a perimeter of a specific triad of frequencies that we have researched before. We have found that in other sites, and in Alatri as well, but in other sites, what these frequencies are reported to do is causing sensations of awe or sensations of mystical experience, but at the same time they can also be tuned for sensations of fear, right? And the main research that we did with while we were researching Alatri was if it was possible to create kind of this perimeter around the city where everyone inside is absolutely untuned with the social
hive mind, like
hive mind state, and in that sense no one could be able to lie, because when you lie you're kind of disrupting the frequency and people would notice, right? So for example, an intruder or a thief would not be able to live alongside everyone, right, in those circumstances. Yeah.
No, I find it extremely interesting. Extremely interesting.
I'm going to show you that. I don't know if you ever seen it, so I'm going to show you what is the actual effect that these frequencies have on the structure as measured by scientists. Can you see the screen?
Yep.
So this is what we see on the church on Alatri, right?
Yep.
So they start to introduce. Alatri is one of those places that has a dormant activity. So it means that even without any input in frequency, it is built in such a way that absorbs the reverberance of the ground, because there's many faults around it, interacts with the water, and creates a normal state of frequency even in a dormant state. That creates that hive mind, and Guy explained, that creates magnetic vortices at every entrance of the city, that tune the people's brains as soon as they pass the gates, that are all astronomically aligned, by the way. So when they started to excite the site, so imagine you have a mass, so people are singing or specific songs and so on. This is the structure. Everything is energized. Wow. Everything is vibrating. Okay?
It's highlighted. It's like when Neo entered the Matrix.
Exactly. So this is captured by a TRV system. TRV system detects the movement of molecules of air and thus translates into the movements of magnetic fields. So all you are seeing here is high charge magnetic fields emitting radiation from the excitement, from the vibration the sound causes.
Wow. So, has anything been recorded from from these particular resonances, maybe sort of leaving the structure from above, or with regards to the ionosphere? Or
I don't get your question.
With regards to viewing what's going on there, that's obviously enclosed within the cathedral itself. Yeah,
it's concentrated. The cathedral is a concentration mechanism of these energies, because it's built on top of a cyclopean wall. And when you have cyclopean walls or massive stones on top of one another without mortar, that are in a specific telluric rich location with underground waterways, what happens is that the stones transmit every single vibration to one another. So the energy is not lost and is an excellent conductant. That's why the content of quartz has to be considered.
So it would be contained within the cathedral itself. It wouldn't be.
It's been exactly, instead of being projected. The ancient technology, like the Grail that Arthur and Merlin went and looked for to heal the land, that technology is the technology before 4000 BC. It's the technology that was used for everyone. There was no social class. For instance, in Iberia and England, there was no social classes. Only the shaman was different to the others.
Sure.
the religious space were open. Was they were called places of the living, what we now call the places of the dead, the dolmens, the tolos, the cairns, all those structures, the menhirs, the cromlechs, all those structures were structures made to maintain the land fertile, to create an energetic field that would make animals more docile, so it's easier to hunt. The small harvests that we have then were more fertile because it uses electroculture that you can see books about and research in the internet. Electroculture was something that was rediscovered in the beginning of the 1900s and then was abandoned because if everyone used it, we didn't need supermarkets. So you could, in a small garden, produce lots of stuff. So when that technology was lost after the event of 4000 BC or 3600 BC, according to other numbers, it regained strength again, as we see it today, with the Templars from the year 800, 1000 beyond. They even didn't call themselves Templars. Mm-hmm. And they used this sound technology. Instead of using for the land, they use it for their own benefits and for their own experience and for their alchemical processes and so on, initiations, whatever you want to call it, illuminations. But people would go to these sites, enter there, and because this is all studied, all made up, they will feel this connection. I'm not denying that the existence of God. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that they used these frequencies to cause the sensation of contact with the divine. That's why that is mostly lost in today's churches, because they are not built with acoustic properties in mind. Yeah. So when you go to ancient church and you play the correct music, even the most skeptic guy couldn't, but there is something touching me. What is this? So,
absolutely.
This Alatri is so powerful in this dormant state that it's recurrent to visitors to claim visions, mystical experiences, and so on. Because, as I said, they are. I'm just before I shut up because this is about you. I'm just going to show you the entrances and the vortices, so you can see that I'm not making it up here.
No, I wouldn't. No, I wouldn't highlight that at all. Crikey! If anything, your train of thought it cross pollinates with sort of how my mind works, because as you know, every temple, every church has an entrance. Yeah, and I'm into a lot of etymology. I mean, you can dissect the word entrance, but it also means entrance. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah? And then you have what's the go-to font that you have in a temple? You have an altar. Yeah, so you have an altered state once you're within that environment. You become entranced. You have an altered state of consciousness. So I find the cross-pollination, what you're talking about, and so where my research goes with regards to what these temples may or may not be doing, triggering higher, if not dormant, higher states of human consciousness that comes down to resonance and acoustics, like you're saying.
So it has 9 of these entrances, not in the same looks, but 9 of this. They are all aligned. There is a new one, but that doesn't count because it doesn't do anything. It's a modern one. It doesn't follow the same principles. So you can see. I'm sorry about that. You can see that according to the time of day, the frequency
fluctuates.
changes. Yeah. So it gets more intense or less intense until it gets to this hour where it's most powerful. So all of this was in the thought of these people, because even the orientation, the heat of the sun, the fluency of the
phase of the moon and everything, right?
Yeah. It's all it's a technology with such wisdom, with such nuances, that it's like you trying to explain your own theory about what you have been written to people that just don't accept any kind of psychotropic element.
Absolutely.
So, and in here is trying to explain forces that are included, that have been demonstrated that they are there, they exist. It was made for that, but still, it's just a coincidence that it is so.
Archaeology's favorite word, right? Coincidence.
Yes. And mine is coincidence takes planning.
Absolutely.
So you see, it's
Just
mega
a
walls.
beautiful example of polygonal mortarless masonry here that I really enjoy. And yeah,
Absolutely.
the blocks aren't small at all. So
Is this in Portugal? Is it Malta or Italy?
Italy.
Or... Yeah, okay.
Yeah, Italy is filled with cyclopean walls.
It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. If anything, it's crazy why people, again, we'll put a pin in that word. Coincidence. This is clearly global. It's clearly global. It doesn't matter when it was. It doesn't matter who was doing it, but they were all doing the same thing. And I don't think that cultures that, by the chronology of what we've been told, the timeline of human evolution regarding the written word, or at least documented history, I don't think that these cultures spontaneously come up with architecture that, for want of a better description, basically mirrors what guys were doing 9,000 miles in the other direction, separated by, I don't know, 1,500 years or whatever. There's clearly there's clearly a point of origin. You know, the archaeology doesn't want to talk about. They just don't want that conversation, and it's eternally frustrating. It really is, because anyone with eyes can just look at it and say, wow.
Unfortunately, it's ontological defense mechanism, I would say, because
Absolutely.
they are faced with the possibility of their whole temple they've built, the foundation is rotting.
Absolutely.
Right, and it's falling apart. It's falling apart.
It's built on foundations of sand. It's sinking, clearly.
It's because there is an obsession with the eye. So, and I think, and I went this year on this CZ expedition with Guy, and we are on the sites with amazing things to see for those with eyes to see it, because they are in plain sight. And how are people?
Should I share some pictures?
Yeah, how are people experience the site? Guy tells them how they see the site, what they photograph.
Oh yeah. So we visited Sintra, which is this mystical place in Portugal, just beautiful, right? And we will see people and tourists, and they're photographing themselves in front of the architectural marvel.
No, you don't see the architecture, but you see, that's how people see the world. If it doesn't fit with me, with my lifestyle, it's a matter of knowledge that I'm not interested in. Even if I don't do DMT, I would want to know about DMT and what were their influences, what are the aspects, what does it does, what has been done, and so on. So it's but people are just, if it doesn't fit on their own self, on their own
I'll
habits.
put my hand up. I mean, like, what, 25 years ago, 30 years ago, literally when I started traveling, when I 18, 19, I found myself in Teotihuacan in Mexico, and I was,
my God, how do you explain that to your wife?
Sorry?
You found yourself in you said it in a way that I turned the corner and there it was.
But I found myself, I mean, I look back on pictures of myself at Teotihuacan, and I'm standing, like you say, in front of these mortarless joints and constructions that are like Kukulkan and Quetzalcoatl that have been carved into these just beautiful, beautiful structures, and they're over my shoulder, but I'm blocking the most important part of what's going on. Do you know what I mean? And I look back, this is prior to me. This is prior to around the time I was reading Fingerprints of the Gods, but I didn't know what particular route or direction my life was going to turn. Do you know what I mean? I was just a tourist at the time, and again, looking back at the pictures, kind of what a wasted opportunity. I was too busy trying to get that perfect picture where I look cool, and the monuments were kind of second to what was going on, you know. And
then you're
yeah, if I
talking
could
with
look at some of
friends.
the negatives and erase myself right now, it's just, yeah, hindsight. It's beautiful. But you're so right. You're so on point. That we are number one. Everyone's number one in their own life, and we're the most important. You know, it's crazy.
I would like to bring the conversation back a bit, if you guys don't mind, to the DMT again, and because I have some questions that I think you might be able to answer that I'm very curious of, because you mentioned multiple times that we produce it endogenously in the body, right? So the body produces its own, although small quantities of DMT. And I have personal experience with this, because even though I have never directly tried DMT or ayahuasca or any of that higher grade of stuff, right? The I would say the ontological bomb, or the right, where you kind of are afraid you're gonna die of shock, right?
Yeah,
It's
death by astonishment, right?
right. So I've never tried any of that, but what I have had experience with is for multiple times now. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night, and either right after a dream, or I'm trying to fall asleep again, and I'm not sleeping yet, meaning that I'm fully awake and conscious, but my brain is still in that resonating wave of I don't know what to call it, honestly. What I see during those moments can only be described as hyperbolic DMT imagery, right? It's just I would say non-Euclidean patterns, and kind of something out of Alex Gray's painting,
Right.
something out of that world, right? And sometimes it can be really scary, because it's patterns and imagery that are not at all congruent with the physical reality we have, right? It's inside out cubes transforming into a multitude of different multiplexing, self-transforming kind of arrangements, right? And sometimes there's symbology associated with it, transfer of knowledge, and I want to hear your opinions on if you have any sort of recommendations of how to prolong this state of natural DMT production in those sleeping hours, if you know anything about it. And the other would be how to minimize kind of this shock value that you have, that kind of can bring you down and bring you out of the experience, or even into resonating with lower, darker frequencies, because there's a lot of stories of people that cannot they cannot interiorize it, and they try to reject it. And then there's specifically with ayahuasca, it's like 8 or 9 hours of vomiting and pain, and it's horrible. So I wanted to hear your thoughts on that, if there's ways of minimizing that, of maybe cultivating those states of frequencies. And
I genuinely, I mean, I've never done ayahuasca. That's still somewhere, in front of me, somewhere down the timeline of what you might call life. But I think the only thing that will get you, again, loose air quotes, used to a DMT experience is repeat doses, with regards to trying to negate or even try and curb that ontological shock, like you say, that is literally, it really is world view shattering. You know, crikey, the first time I done DMT myself, I was a little bit silly. I was in possession of changa, which is basically the root bark that DMT is extracted from. Excuse me. That's somewhat laced with what's been extracted from it. And when I was in possession of that, I was told that just be careful, because it's the same but different, you know. Be wary, give it a little bit of respect, or a lot of respect.
Like a mule.
Absolutely. But for want of a better description, when I actually smoked my first bowl of yeah, Changa infused root bark. I didn't think anything was really sort of, I didn't feel any overriding sensation in my consciousness. I was privy, I'd done DMT before, and I was kind of waiting for this onset of, I guess, panic that I had to need to kind of suppress, but nothing was kind of forthcoming. And I was thinking, okay, maybe I've got a bad batch, maybe I've done this wrong, maybe I've burnt the DMT, maybe I'm smoking it incorrectly, maybe I need to do a little bit more research here. And like a fool, I actually loaded up a bowl of 35, 40 milligrams of DMT and smoked that. And
an heroic dose.
Wow, seriously. I mean, most people say take that third hit and then the rest will be history. But I literally had one mad, bad, ridiculous, inhalation of this DMT, thinking, okay, it's going to start to get weird. I'm going to hold this in for as long as I can, take the second, go for the third. The second bowl never happened. You know, it was all of a sudden like the Changa just, everything about what I thought was me was completely overridden by something far more powerful that was clearly in the room with me, that wasn't happy with what I was doing. It was almost like a bit of a psychological smackdown. It was like, dude, you've done it now. I mean, there were no words, but there was like a transmission that I could hear in my mind, almost like a laughing, like you've done it now. Oh, you think you're ready? You want to see? Well, you can't close your eyes to this. Strap on your seatbelt because shit's about to get really weird. And yeah, literally within, I'd say, I mean, I was about to say a heartbeat, but for 10-15 seconds of that experience, I literally felt my entire being falling out of the back of my mind like a cascading waterfall of what essentially it meant to be me. And I thought, literally, I'm dying. This is how we die. I'm literally leaving my body. And the clarity in the room all of a sudden became like 5D, HD, like surround, like high definition. There was like no oxygen in the room. But the crazy thing about it was I felt just as part of the room, and everything that was kind of like my books. I mean, I felt part of everything, but I was still terrified. You know, I was like, this shouldn't be happening. This ain't right. I mean, I'm going to be on the front page of the newspaper tomorrow, the first guy to die on DMT. You know, my girlfriend's going to come home with my newborn. And like, where's daddy? Oh, daddy's dead on the balcony. You know, daddy done DMT and Changa. Daddy wanted to find out what life was about, and he topped himself. I mean, that was literally what was going through my mind in split seconds, because I was clinging to the tiles and the brickwork, thinking, oh shit, I've done it. I've actually gone too far now. This is it. This is my last breath. You know, but again,
so you didn't even have that reflection that, calm down, you'll be sober in a few hours, just relax.
No, I was terrified. No, I genuinely thought this is different. This isn't like the DMT experience I had a few months prior, which I felt like I had to have writing these books, you know, kind of, I'm talking the talk, let's kind of walk the walk. I didn't want to kind of go on people's experiences, affidavits, and sort of loosely quote Terence McKenna constantly, you know. I kind of wanted to find out what it was all about, but in retrospect, I guess I was somewhat pig-headed and lazy with regards to really understanding what this may or may not do to my outlook on three-dimensional reality, on my worldview. You know, yeah. When I thought I was dying on DMT, there was a wave of, okay, now stuff starting to change, because like what was the chairs, the balcony, the birds, it just disappeared, like in bang, it's gone. Damn, where am I? You know, what's going on here? Crikey, I'm scared shitless, but actually I feel quite at home here. This is very, very, very odd. But there was what was in front of me was indescribable, really. Like a shape-shifting mechanical, biomechanical entity that was trying to calm me down, trying to reassure me, you know, just kind of, it's okay, we're friends, we know each other, don't, come on, it's been a while, it's been a long time, but you're back, you know. And I guess why people say you have a trip sitter is because they can suppress that overriding feeling of, damn, I've really done it now, you know. They can, even though when you're in the DMT state, you're seeing, I guess, a different outlook on what we see on everyday three-dimensional reality. You can still hear, I guess, the wingman next to you that's saying, dude, it's okay, your pulse is fine, your heart rate's fine, don't sweat it, you're not dying, everything's cool. And just a little calming hand on the wrist, do you know what I mean? It's that in itself is so reassuring in this particular state of mind, or state of conscious being. But not having that with me when I guess rather like or stupidly took free-based DMT and Changa and then had this override, and damn, you've really done it now. You want to see what it's all about? Well, here we go. You know, it was, I almost felt like the guy in Clockwork Orange that's got his eyes like, you want to see it? Dude, you're going to see it all.
Yeah.
But coming back from that experience, again, trying to verbalize what it was about I think in my lifetime will be forever impossible. Although the initial feeling of dread and sheer terror was overridden by what I can only describe as I've said, a multidimensional, shape-shifting, organic, machine-like something that knew who I was, that was trying to remind me of who I was and where I'd come from. Just say, look, dude, everything's cool. And when you're ready, take a look at this. Take a look at this. And they're showing you just impossible feats of wonder, you know. Just I mean, again, I'd like to give you an example, but there's no words, you know. But it's when you come back.
Do you feel like information and data itself is kind of super condensed into this thing, that the reason why you can't describe it with words is because words are kind of one-dimensional, right? One after the other, one code and then the next, right? And this is kind of this information itself is kind of hyper condensated in this one particular hyper object, if you will, right?
Yeah. For all intents and purposes, it feels like you're almost suspended like a point particle in the middle, literally right in the center of an infinite cosmos, where you literally open your arms and you are, I mean, my left arm is right out there. I mean, like, we're talking light years away. My right arm's light years away in this direction, and I can see and feel what everything is about. Like, it's again, we're essentially made of stardust, and it kind of gets boring when you hear the "we are the cosmos reflecting itself" and what have you, yada 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 yada. But when you have this experience, you're like, that's what they mean. That's exactly what they mean. Maybe we are the cosmos or the universe, built into, I guess, human form in order for the universe to experience itself. It's so hard to compartmentalize.
Let me ask you, because you mentioned stardust, and that's one of my books still on writing, that I explore consciousness and concepts like the real self, the morphogenic fields, and so on. Yeah. Do you think that person that puts the hand on you, that says it's all right, that it's other than your real self, or could it be your real self, you're assuring the 5% consciousness of the body that cannot be removed. Once it's implanted, once you're born, you cannot take that away from. That's essentially what dies. Let's put it that way. So do you think it's someone else, or could it be your real self showing your physical body, your biosuit, that kind of information?
No, absolutely. It's a wonderful question. Absolutely wonderful question. And I'm gonna kind of dance or skirt around it just a little bit, because the book that I'm writing at the moment, I guess the conclusion, or the loose area that I'm kind of driving the conclusion to be towards, is exactly what you're talking about. And I think that there's a number of ancient artworks, ancient mythologies, and ancient axioms, I guess, that appear, from what where my research is leading at the moment, would certainly appear to suggest that it might be a higher version of myself, as opposed to an overriding, I guess, being, deity, godlike entity that, loose air quotes again, created me, let's say. And I find, there's so much I want to say, but I can't say without publishing this next book.
Sure. My perspective, imagine that when a child or a creature is born, imagine like a fisherman's hook.
Yep.
Tapped to a line, okay? And that line is connected to the real self, the entity that came down to experience this for the universe, for the what I call the animus equilibrium, the energy that surrounds everything, and everything is the same as above as below, and so on and so on. So my question is, do certain drugs, including DMT, allow, because everything you described to me, that's why I make the question in the first place. When you describe that your arms are infinite, that you are in contact with everything, that's how I imagine the dimension of the real self, of the soul, whatever you want to call it, that incarnates in the physical body, in a biosuit that allows to experience a physical reality. So once those barriers, because as we've seen, the DMT blocks certain frequencies of the brain. Could it be that that veil and main control of the body that is given in normal circumstances is removed from the brain, and then you can start experience as your real self and no longer as your body? So you have to calm yourself down, because you know that if your body gone, you couldn't keep experiencing reality on this platform, let's call it like that. So if you, without ending into your book, do you think that this makes sense, what I'm talking about?
I think what you've said is extremely poetically put, and I think you're probably tiptoeing down the same train of thought and investigation to where my research seems to be heading. I think there's an overriding sense of, when we have these experiences, that we're not essentially, I mean, we're essentially leaving this meat suit, this rendition of reality.
Physicality is removed. Could it be a correct way to put it? You lose physicality, and that's what's frightening, because we're not used to that.
Absolutely. And Buddhist cosmology, Dogen cosmology, talk about an immaterial other realm of existence that, I mean, their own words, imparted certain understandings regarding their cosmologies, which almost reflect what we see in a 21st century physicist's whiteboard, you know. For these, I guess, archaic civilizations or cultures to be privy to pictograms and glyphs, however you want to describe them, that talk about a fundamental understanding of reality. I mean, how can a Dogen 6,000 years ago even be contemplating what reality is? I mean, as far as we were concerned, they're a nomadic kind of tribe that just wanders Western Mali, sets up the tent with the camels, and do you know what I mean? The caravan.
But back then, you were born into a specific tribe, let's call it like that. in the Dogon, for instance, and you get that age, and the shaman comes to you and says, "You don't know what reality is. This is reality." Boom, and whoa.
There you go.
Okay, now I get it. I didn't understand what you guys are talking about. Now I know. So,
and I think just like Jeremy Narby with the cosmic serpent, when he was in the Amazon basin talking to the Ashaninka tribesmen and elders and shaman, he was saying, well, how did you? I mean, out of the tens of, if not hundreds of thousands of botanical varieties in the Amazon basin, you've selected a root bark and a leaf from two different varieties, blended it together in order to have this consciousness elevating. And she's like, how did you do it? And they say the plants told us. They believe that they can see molecular structures of what the plants are made of on these experiences, and there's no reason why that can't have been repeated, if not reflected.
How did they have the experience to tell them what the plants would be without having the plants to have the experience?
Exactly. It's almost what do you call it, like a conundrum. It's unfathomable unless they're right, unless that's genuinely what's going on.
The beginning of pharmacology for instance, in China, the guy that started it there, or the more famous for it, he tested more than 10,000 plants on himself to see the results and documenting them. So it's very lucky he didn't die.
Absolutely.
But he tried more than 10,000 plants on himself and then wrote the effects of the supposed plants.
Absolutely.
So,
well, I've had people say to me, why do you think the ancient Egyptians were privy to what the molecular structure of a chemical compound we produce in the human brain that's, again, littered throughout the world, animal and botanical kingdom? How did they know what it looks like? You're saying that there's a technology. Now, again, I'm one for going down I'm not an ancient aliens guy, Von Daniken, with regards to building the pyramids and this, that, and the other. And there's people out there with YouTube channels that are talking about ancient machines that were precision cutting things left, right. I mean, I'm not going to throw their baby out with the bathwater, but give me a little bit more to go on, as opposed to just this is what I hypothesize, but there's nothing there to show.
Sure, it's overcomplicating something that technology was made in a much simpler way.
Absolutely. And if the plants and chemicals ingested via ourselves are actually able to show us what their two-dimensional structure actually looks like, then you don't need you don't need an electron microscope. You don't need nanotechnology in order to look at what these molecules look like. If the plants and these experiences, like Nabi has suggested and the Dogon is suggesting, the plants are actually privy to this information, and they're switching our brain into a different gear where we're able to understand or commune with maybe even a sentient, I mean, even the Quran talks about sentient beings waiting to be released within fauna in order to unlock high states of consciousness,
We live in an age that people are led to believe that plants are just insensible creatures that just grow and die.
Yeah, flowers are flowerless, water it, if it dies, throw it out. But damn,
people need to understand that there is, as we have our levels of consciousness, every creature, every rock, every planet, every star has a level of consciousness inherent in their molecular structure itself. So if we know that, for instance, as in the early 2000s, the academics were forced, because they were forced to, otherwise they wouldn't recognize it. They were forced to admit that trees could communicate with one another through great distances. They had mechanisms to warn other plants or other trees of the same species that something was right or wrong, because they were forced, because they found more than, I don't want to exaggerate the number, but was some few thousand kudus dead and those kudus were feeding of acacias. So, right. So the acacias.
It's poetry, right?
So the acacias, when they started to be overeaten, started to emit a specific pheromone that is a means of communication. And why it's a means of communication? Because they have the receptacles to receive that communication.
There you go.
So if we didn't have ears, we wouldn't have a mouth, because no one would listen to what we're saying. So they have a mechanism to produce the communication and to receive the communication. Okay, so
just like we're hardwired the same. Exactly. We're not so different.
So when they started to be overeaten, they started to emit this specific pheromone, let's call it like that, that was received by other acacias. So what happens? They turn their molecular structure to poisonous. So when the kudus get to the trees that are already worn by the tree that was overeaten, they start to eat and they die. Because the tree
so it's essentially protecting itself from extinction.
So, and they couldn't understand why there were so many animals dead, because everything was the same. The trees were just like the same. Everything was the same.
What's happened? Yeah.
So when they started investigating, all the animals had the same poisoning death.
Wow.
And that poisoning came from the acacia tree.
Wow.
So that was the point when academics no longer can say that there is no communication between the trees, at least from the acacia.
And it's crazy when you talk about the acacia, especially in the likes of Africa, North Africa. I mean, the Sahara now, as you say, it's just this desert. It's just a wasteland. But it wasn't, you know. So you go back 7,000, 8,000, 10,000 years ago. That's as green as the Amazon basin. Now, how many species of acacia or entheogenic varieties of botanical species have literally just been extinct, just gone by the wayside, you know? And crikey, for anyone to say that couldn't happen, well, you just go to the Amazon basin today. It's still happening. It's going on today. It's been going on for thousands of years. So for people to kind of, I do get people poo-poo my research somewhat with regards to what this entheogenic chemical compound extracted from extracted from the acacia in the Nile Valley. I don't think that it was alone. I think there was probably hundreds, if not thousands, that were readily available that we just have no idea what they were. Just like soma, you know, the ingredients for soma could have come from the Sahara, and right now it's just a wasteland. We don't know what's under there either.
I'm showing the old. That's the only thing that exists. It's this little text on this fantastic thing. It's the only thing that I can find all these years after.
Wow.
So they recognized this in the 2000s, but this was record in 1983. So they took their time. But
it clearly says that the acacia's alive. The acacia's got a mind of its own. Do you know what I mean? It's like if we're being attacked, what do? We put up a defense mechanism, which is clearly what was going on there, you know. And thank you for making me privy to that. I was completely unaware of it. So
in fact, they say, let me add to what I already said, because I didn't remember it all. They actually say that at certain points the animal didn't even need to eat from the tree, since they were all in an alert state. As soon as one felt there is an animal, and pay attention to the word felt that there is an animal that is not eating the tree. So how does the tree know that there's an animal? Okay, this is sensitivity beyond what we are assuming. So they're trapping on their own words, expecting we don't notice what they are saying. But since the tree senses there is an animal, it starts emitting that process and managed to increase 50 times the amount of venom into his leaves on the spot. 50 times. And transmits the message to the next tree 50 meters away. Look, there's a guy lying down here.
And to find that that's the acacia that does that, to me, I find that absolutely fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. Because again, if there are, I guess, independent sentient beings residing within these, or at least access to these are residing within the chemical makeup of these plants, yeah, there's no reason that they're not being directed by the same entities that we're incommunicado with when we have this heightened state of conscious awareness.
Let's take Buddhas, for instance. Let's take Sautama Gautama. If you achieve illumination and you enjoy the sheer experience of this reality, when you are invited or you choose to come back or however it works, and they tell you, do you want to be a tree? Oh, that must be interesting. I can share the birds, the timeless sense of time. I can see from sunlight to sundown. I can see the stars. I can commune with nature. So when you're in that state, it doesn't matter if you are going to incarnate in a fly or a lizard or a tree or whatever. And I'm not an incarnation particularly believer, but I understand the concept. Once you understand that this is all a game, let's put it like that you can, for instance, GTA 5, it's not GTA, it's GTA that's called Grand Theft Auto. Okay, right. 5. You could experience the game as a dog, as a bird, and people
with some mods you could, but yeah. So that's not on the base game. That's modding it, but yeah, you could, I guess.
I find it fascinating that the Buddha he became enlightened when he sat beneath the Bodhi tree. And what is that? It's a fig tree. What is the fig tree? It's an acacia.
Exactly.
So, yeah, trees talk. There's no doubt in my mind. There's no doubt in my mind. But if I found myself saying this 20 years ago, I'd have been like, "Oh, dude, you're crazy. What are you tree huggers? Look at them. Oh, they're all bad." No, they were just ahead of the game. I had a lot of learning. I had a lot of catching up to do.
But before you explain us a little bit better what your ideas are, I just have one final question before you do. That is, if I can remember, because I got a blank just right now. What was my question? I'm terribly sorry.
I don't remember as well.
Yeah, and it's gone. It's a, oh, there it is. There it is. So I've 30 years ago, or more than that, I started to listen to, no, more than 30 years, almost 40 years ago, I started hearing to Terence McKenna, who was the only source for this kind of information at the time. So I still have all these presentations, all these videos from back then. And there's something that fascinates me about DMT, because it seems it has been a shift on the experience. Because I learned from Terence McKenna and all the people that communed with him and came aggregate in these documentaries and this series, and people describe the experience of DMT as you described it, 1, 2, 3, or according to the dose. And then they always speak about these little humanoid figures that are not actually humanoid, but these figures that jump into your chest and to your knees and so on, and start speaking with one another and speaking with you and giving you orders or giving you lessons and so on. And the people that I see, but the people that I see describing the experience from a certain point in time, but I cannot pinpoint, but perhaps already far away in the 2000s, 2010, perhaps furthermore, no one speaks about these little guys. Everyone speaks, as Guy explained, or as you explained, as something it's not LSD, it's not that geometry, but it's something like images that cannot be exactly described, although they can be understood. So,
you know what I liken them to?
Sorry?
No, I liken these small tykes that you're talking about. I liken it to you get Willy Wonka in the chocolate factory, right? You've got Willy Wonka, who's the overriding guy that's produced all these magical things, and all the kids, even the parents, are like mind blown what's going on inside this factory. But he also has the Oompa Loompas, the minions that are running around, and that's kind of what I liken that to. I mean, sorry for jumping in and interjecting, but in my mind's eye, that's kind of what I see as what may or may not be going on there with regards to an overriding deity, power, super consciousness, what God, whatever you want to call it. But I see these other, I guess, Oompa Loompas, minions, entities running around that are not necessarily always doing what they're told, but
a little mischievous, just a little bit.
a little mischievous. And sometimes, again, it's not always just a walk in the park. There's some ill-programmed little tykes out there that really want to scare the bejesus out of you, you know. Sort of, don't do this again. Why are you here? But I think 95%, or maybe even higher than that, of the experiences that at least I've had, and interactions with people that I've had, these tykes, these jesters, these machine elves, whatever they are, seem to be more benevolent as opposed to wanting to do you harm or scare the life out of you. Really.
So they still exist during the experience. They still
absolutely
exist.
Absolutely. And I believe that they are independent of each other, you know, with regards to like the Wonka and the Oompa Loompas. I think they are just as
like guardian creatures that are seeing you transverse the veil, and the gatekeepers somehow.
Yeah, it's almost like some of them want to walk your hand through the pastures of the Elysian Fields to say, this is the way we're going, we're skipping, I'm going to show you the boss now, here we go, now here's the boss, get ready for this. There we go, them guys. Yeah, them little guys.
So now that I made my question, Guy, did you have a question?
Off the top of my head, I had one thing a couple of moments ago. What was it?
Oh, we can talk about the myth of Osiris, and when it comes back to you, I mean, I might even say something that might even.
Yeah, did you have a presentation that you wanted to do?
Well, no, so I mean, I've got a presentation, but the presentation can run for as long as you need it to run. Really, I mean, I could talk about this for hours, but I mean, realistically, I mean, quite, we've been talking for an hour and a half already. I can't believe it. It's wonderful. But I can bring the presentation up and just give you the bullet points of what I believe may or may not be happening with regards to from this mythology and constellations with regards to these psychotropic chemical compounds that seem to be key to understanding, I guess, reality, who we are, where we've come from, what it is to be human. And where we might be going after, because I'm sure you've heard me talk on podcasts before that prior to this research, Insidigris is a famous one. Yeah. Wonderful.
Had to share that one, sorry.
I was of the mindset that if you have a bad turn of luck, you die in your 20s, 30s, 40s, or whatever it is or isn't. But when your time's up, it's fade to black. You're a bag of bones boxed up. Thanks for the memories. And that's it, you know. There's nothing more. There's no hereafter. I wasn't religious. I'm still not religious, but I had an overriding sense of thinking a lot of these scriptures were nothing but, I guess, food for brainwashing material for people that couldn't kind of think for themselves, that needed direction and wanted help spiritually. Which I think has become somewhat corrupted or bastardized in the past sort of 120, I don't know, 200, 300, even 400 years, you know.
Look, you can pick Gibran from today, from 1,000 years from now, and see, this was the religious book of the time. Let's make a religion. All hail Gibran.
But I would look at the kind of the panorama of the thousands of religions that there are in existence still today, and the tens of thousands that have gone since the advent of the written word, you know, for the past sort of, I guess, 5, 6, 7,000 years. And I always had something in my mind with regards to, well, if you're all adamant and you're that sort of sold down the river that you're right, show me one piece of evidence, just one. Because as far as I'm aware, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but for the plethora of these thousands of religions since day to today, I don't think any of them have proved anything with regards to how relevant their information may or may not be with regards to an overriding deity. Call it God, call it Allah, call it Buddha, call it whoever you want to call it, you know.
Sure.
And I kind of, yeah, rather incorrectly kind of threw all the scripture aside. I didn't have time for it, didn't want time for it whatsoever. But it came back to more so, I guess, Christianity in the modern age with regards, I say the modern age, I mean sort of the past 2,000 years, excuse me, with regards to the notion of resurrection. And that's where the mythology of Osiris and what I believe is the original, loose air quotes again, god of resurrection, that's how it comes from. And with regards to talking about the DMT experience and understanding that for all intents and purposes, DMT tricks, literally tricks. I mean, science will agrees with this. It tricks your brain into a death-like state of mind. You think you're dying. We won't go over that again, but again, after this 8 to 15, maybe 20-minute experience that's changed your outlook, shattered your worldview, you come back to view the world with fresh eyes, with an understanding of love thy neighbor, be nice, let's look after the damn planet, you know. In my mind's eye, that is the ultimate resurrection, you know. Die while you're alive, come back, and actually, I mean, if we all got a second chance, if you did die in a car crash for not looking left and right, and you was a bit of a shitty character first of all, you're going to want to come back and live more of a just a nice life. Just be, like I say, be nice to thy neighbor, like the scriptures say. But I believe that once we have this experience on DMT, a resurrection for all intents and purposes, what better gift could there be with regards to wanting to share an understanding of love of yourself, of your neighbor, forgive the guy that's maybe done you wrong, as hard as that may be. Don't pollute the planet, don't rape the planet, I mean, Graham Hancock has said that with regards to all these politicians right now that seem to be, sorry about my language, but fucking the state of society and the planet up as a whole between them, if anyone that was voted into parliament in these powers of position that had an initial DMT or an ayahuasca experience, god damn, I think the world would be a nicer place, you know. And I don't think there would be an overarching sense of,
well, they have an experience,
divisive religion where we're at each other's throats, you know, because I genuinely do believe now through my research that these entheogenic extractions from the tree of life, DMT, genuinely bonds people. It unites cultures that were essentially at each other's throats for thousands of years, you know. It just gives you from my experience and people that I've spoken to, it just makes them want to be a better person. And if that's wrong, why the hell is that illegal? You know, no one's died from DMT. And if our ancestors had in fact worked this out for themselves via technology, via the plants themselves, what could be more overriding as a sense of a gift to future generations of humanity from themselves to build a mythology or an understanding where cultures that are separated by time, by distance, can actually read the allegory of what these scriptures and myths are meant to be with regards to, if we seriously thinking that there's hawk-headed deities or elephant-headed deities walking around ancient India, the Giza Plateau, that were just spiritually emancipated and preaching about all these just mind-blowing, life again, worldview shattering perspectives that can change your reality and change the world for the better. I think you have to question yourself as a person to actually say, well, could there really be a hawk-headed god walking around, or an elephant-headed deity? And like the research shows, that's not essentially mine, but it goes a long way to underlying what my hypothesis is about. But these the crikey, the artworks that depict these elephant-headed deities, these hawk-headed deities, baboon-headed deities, ibis-headed deities, it all appears to be brain anatomy. Should we care to look inside ourselves, the gods genuinely, quite literally, reside inside us. You know, there's so many cross sections of a human brainstem that let me just, I'm sure I've got this on this present.
Well, while you put that, while you're thinking, I have the image that Egypt, it's not by chance that the ancient Egypt was probably the most into spirituality people that we have record of. They all daylight, the day life of an Egyptian was fully surrounded by spirituality and the spiritual world and
Sure.
the elements and so on. So my question regarding to what you were saying is, and I think it's really a segue into what you are going to present, is do you think that once we eliminate the impossible, whatever remains, no matter how improbable it is, must be the truth? So if you can't have elephant-headed people going around on the street, but everyone believes in them, there is an experience where people are actually communing with these forms, with these shapes, in such a way that they relic them as actual divinities or spiritual helpers, that then make them represent them in stone, in art, and they are part of their lives because they passed through that process of initiation. Perhaps that's why initiation is still a closed performance to the high elite. Even in the low levels, it's just there is no death in the initiations. It's just small rituals. But if you go up in the echelon, you'll see that the same thing that was done in the Osiris, that was done in several other places in the world, that is going to the darkness, die, re-emerge through the waters into the light as a new birth. So do you think that DMT was used during that process? That's the part where the body dies, where they put on those box, the stone box that people still call coffins, to experience the actual death with help with what we defend the archaeacoustics of the sites. But let's put it on your what you were going to present.
I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with regards to what may or may not have been going on with regards to these King's Chamber, Queen's Chamber sarcophagi, that again they're made out of materials that resonate with human consciousness as well, crystals, you know. And I think that everything about these, I mean, the Great Pyramid in itself, I think that's multifaceted. I think that has so many different functions.
Yeah, agreed.
It's almost like a...
But then you have the Osiris shaft that doesn't need to have that many functions.
Absolutely.
And it looks to me exactly as a healing place for serious trauma. It's all constructed underground. It has all the aspects of an hypogeum rooms with hypogeum rooms in it, and then you have a final one at the bottom where there used to be 4 quartz columns that are now broken surrounding the stone box that was just on the surface of the water. So only the lid was placed on the surface of the water. So that's why I think it was for some serious tissue reconstruction or serious trauma, because I think the pillars were used as an electrical component of some sort with the interaction of sound and the water and so on. So,
and I think the same thing was going on via the Serapeum and the Assyrian as well.
Exactly.
I mean, the Assyrian itself, it's just the timeline that they say, Seti the First. It's it's the same construction, X, Y, Z. It's clearly not. Seti quite obviously unearthed, megalithic works that were, way before his dynastic era, and the construction, excuse me, the architecture doesn't look out of place from what we find what's going on in Tiwanaku. And Tiwanaku, again, we find, excuse me, I've got to be careful what I say, because again, a lot of this is tied to my next publication, but clearly there was a point of origin that these guys have remembered and constructed these monuments, or it was the same civilization going back to Zep Tepi, like the Egyptians call it, 36,000 BC. And I don't think that is too outrageous to even speculate with regards to the Egyptians trying to recount their own chronology of civilization, their own timeline, where archaeologists say no, it's all just mythology. It's not really what they were talking about. Civilization doesn't go back that far. But yeah, we now have the Dryas impact theory as well, which is quite clearly, should that happen today, you wouldn't recognize society in 100 years from now with regards to how we've evolved technologically. It would literally be a proverbial reset,
Exactly.
And I think Laird Scranson's right as well when he talks about Zep Tepi. Why would they call it the first time if there wasn't other times where they've tried to reseed and kickstart humanity? It would just be called the time,
Exactly.
And there seems to be cycles of cataclysm that maybe seem to repeat every milestone or half possession or even full possessional cycle. I find it rather ironic that the last cataclysm, the end of the last ice age, is literally half of a processional cycle of the great year of 25,920 years. I find that mind blowing, and who says it won't happen again? Quite clearly, it's happened at least once. That was the first time.
It's not far. It does seem it's not far.
Absolutely. But no, I'll touch on what my research was and how it all sort of, I'll give you a whistle stop tour of what it's about and why I think it is important to us in today's age, really, with regards to religion and I guess the bastardization of psychedelics as a whole across the entire the entire culture, really. It was when I was watching the Spirit Molecule that I touched on some time ago that it really hit me when I saw the makeup of what DMT, or at least a two-dimensional rendition, would look like. And there's one or two different, maybe two or three different varying renditions of a 2D rendition, but they're across the ballpark, they're the same. They look the same. There's only two or three ways of going about it, and what we see is what we see. But when I was confronted with the molecular structure of DMT for the first time, I will bring this image up now. I couldn't help but think that I'd seen it somewhere before. You can't share. All right, here we go. This is typical. I can't share. Are we sharing now?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Yeah, I wanted to know where I'd seen you can't share, because permissions in order to share, and don't do this to me, please. Not today. No, here we go. We're going to have a brain fart with a computer now.
You have a hammer.
It's saying can't share your screen. You must grant permissions in order to share screen. I know I'm embarrassed.
Let me see if I can see what are the problem here or not. Definitions. This is for me. Guy, where do I go?
I think I found it.
You did?
I think, I think I found it. What about now?
Yeah,
It's
got
done. There you go.
Fantastic. Okay, here we go. I'm just gonna see initial presentation, but what I'm gonna bring up is here. Okay. All right. Can you actually see my cursor on the screen as well?
Yeah, we can. I'm just going to shut
Fantastic.
down my camera for a second, but I'm
No
still
problem.
here.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So my circles circling basically a common rendition of what the DMT, or a 2D rendition of DMT, would actually look like, the molecule itself. Excuse me. And I had an overriding feeling that I'd seen this somewhere before, but I was racking my brain. It wouldn't come to me. It wouldn't come to me. So I went to the beach and just unwound and trying to compartmentalize all this information that I weren't privy to only sort of an hour and a half prior to this mind-bending documentary that I can't recommend highly enough, The Spirit Molecule, and where I'd seen it before. And it was literally, it was almost biblical. It's like a movie. The sky is literally parted in front of me. It was about 10 o'clock at night, and then Orion was just staring at me, and it was like that ice bucket challenge, you know, like I was like, oh, I get it, because I understood what the myth of Osiris was all about. I've always identified Orion in the sky as Osiris because I've been mythology crazy, ancient Egypt crazy for the past sort of 2 or 3 decades. And I was a little embarrassed in my mind's eye that I hadn't picked this up whilst I was watching the documentary. But when it was in front of me, it was just a sense of overriding, damn, this is it. This is Osiris. This is the resurrection. Maybe Osiris, albeit Orion, the constellation in the night sky, has been, the stars are somewhat fixed. It's not that I'm saying, excuse me, that the constellation of Orion is some kind of intergalactic DMT molecule in the sky. That DMT is that's what it is. I'm not saying that that's what it is at all, but I'm saying that the ancient Egyptians have understood via technology, albeit the plants themselves or the shamans have understood what the 2D molecular structure of DMT actually looks like, and by literally a twist of fate, we have an overriding constellation in the night sky that they will feel safe or certain that they can now build a mythology around, let's say. Because the myth of Osiris basically starts at a banquet that's been laid on by Osiris's wicked brother Seth, or Set, depending on your sources. Excuse me. And all the guests are basically asked if they would like to lay down in what is described as a beautifully carved ornate coffer, albeit coffin, and whoever's dimensions come up correct, almost like I think there's a lot of Disney has been kind of it's used this license via stories like excuse me, Cinderella and the Lion King and what have you, with regards to whoever this slipper befits. Guest after guest keeps trying this beautiful coffer. They come up too wide, too fat, too short, too tall, too skinny, until the turn of Osiris. Osiris lays down inside this coffer and it fits him immaculately. It's made for this guy. Seth knows this, and to the guest's stunned amazement, we find that Seth's men decide to put a lid on the coffer and fasten it. They then take this coffer with Osiris locked inside, and they cast it onto the Nile, and it's floating on the Nile for days, weeks, months on end, until where it comes to rest in modern day Lebanon, known back in the day as Byblos, which is where we get the word Bible from as well, because in Byblos they were the first guys to use papyrus for the written word. Excuse me. My research dives into that with regards to an extract from these reeds that may have actually been an entheogenic potion, like ayahuasca of the Amazon basin, but I won't digress at the moment. I go more into that in the books. But what happens is when his coffer actually runs aground in Byblos, it actually gets consumed by this beautiful tamarisk tree that's growing on the banks of the Nile, and Osiris basically becomes further entombed within this tamarisk tree. And we find that the tamarisk tree is a variety of acacia. So his wife Isis gets wind of, the king of Byblos, first of all, decides to fell this tree and hang it in his palace. Almost, I mean, the story of Star Wars and Han Solo and Carbonite being hung on the walls, it's all the same kind of loose storytelling, you know. We know that I forget his name now. He wrote Star Wars. It was George Lucas was very much into Egyptian mythology. Hence,
from Joseph Campbell, particularly from the book of Joseph Campbell. Yeah,
there we go.
The Hero with No Face, if I'm not mistaken, or something like that.
But Isis gets wind of Osiris being confined within this tamarisk tree hanging in the king of Byblos's palace, and she actually barters with the king of Byblos, who agrees to set Osiris free. Osiris has now been rescued from inside a tamarisk tree, an acacia, and has now become synonymous with the lifeblood of the acacia, which is important, which we'll get back to in a moment. His brother gets wind of this, that he's been rescued, and he's enraged by it and decides to dismember Osiris into a number of pieces and kill him once and for all. And it's there where the Egyptian mythology then also shares a cosmological namesake in the sky, because Osiris then becomes immortalized as the constellation of Orion. And Egyptologists will tell you that's how the story went. They don't want to pick the bones out of it. They don't want to read between the lines. They will say that's their mythology. Move on. Come and have a look at this pottery. Don't look here. But it's in my mind's eye, my research, where I like to believe that this, if we look within this, the so-called sap or lifeblood of the acacia, it's where we find DMT. We also understand that the molecular structure of DMT now appears to share a plethora of commonalities with what's going on in the night sky as Osiris, albeit Orion, in the night sky. And Osiris was also known as the original god of resurrection, the lord or god of the underworld. And Egyptian, Egyptologists will tell you that, and Graham Hancock will talk about it a lot as well, with regards to when you die in ancient Egypt, when a pharaoh dies, they say that he will pass to the underworld via the constellation of Orion. Now, that's not elaborated on, and I think in my mind's eye, it makes more sense. I mean, does it make sense that first of all, you're going to have a guy that's rescued from inside a tree, that's then become synonymous with the lifeblood of the sap of this tree, killed again, then being reminiscent and immortalized as a macroscopic namesake in the sky, which appears to reflect the molecular structure of what we find within the acacia, albeit the lifeblood of the acacia. I think that makes a lot more sense with regards to, you can access this immaterial underworld that's inhabited by dead pharaohs, by sentient entities. I don't think that when you die, your body crosses some kind of intergalactic plane via the belt stars of Orion to the other world. I don't think that's what's going on here, although a lot of researchers don't really want to elaborate on it. That's the mythology, and that's what they're going to kind of regurgitate. But again, I think this is all allegorical, that you can you can have this proverbial resurrection. You can meet the gods, meet the ancestors, commune with a higher order of sentient existence, and elevate your consciousness via a naturally occurring chemical compound that reflects or mirrors what we're seeing within the cosmos, within the sky. If future generations like ourselves can learn to read between the lines and are privy to let's say electron microscopes, and we look within the sap of the acacia, we will find a 2D rendition of the lifeblood of Osiris, DMT, that will appear to mimic or indeed mirror a cosmic counterpart in the sky. And what a wonderful way to try and get this message across to future generations of humanity, you know. And I've had, and admittedly as well, when I released The Spirit in the Sky, people were saying to me that it's a little bit odd or ill-fitting. You have a trapezium here, whereas the benzene ring is more of a hexagon. It could be pie in the sky. It could be pareidolia. You might be reading into this more than you need be. But the mythology doesn't stop there. This is where it gets really, really interesting, because in order to, I guess, expand on this trapezium, we would have to open up the constellation that's below it, known as Lepus in the 21st century, which is basically a rabbit. Okay, the ancient Egyptians knew of this deity as Wenet. But what we find is that Osiris was also synonymous with an ancient Egyptian rabbit-headed deity. So if we decide to join the proverbial dots of Orion via this rabbit's head, or albeit Wenet in the constellation that's literally directly below it, something really profound starts to happen. Because throughout ancient Egypt, 5,000 years ago, we had what was known as the mysteries of Abydos, which is still a ceremonial practice that takes place today. With regards to the annual flooding of the Nile, and people say that that's why he's got green skin, because it's the vital lifeblood of the Nile Valley being rejuvenated once again for another year. Which again, I don't dismiss, as I'm sure you guys are well aware. A lot of Egyptian mythology and hieroglyphics don't just have one meaning; it's multi-layered. There's multi-layered meanings that you can look into. And should we care to look at the myth of, excuse me, of Abydos, it gets really interesting, because we're told that Osiris travels to the island of Abydos via what is known as the cosmic barge, which is called the Neshmet. Excuse me. And what we find within the constellation of Lepus, the rabbit's head, more specifically, are a number of stars that appear to reflect what is going on. Here we go. This is the Osiris assimilated to Wenet, the hare-headed deity. And we'll get to Sahu in a moment, because he's also synonymous with an overriding, what is described as the grandfather of the gods as well. And it's very, very, very important. What we find, if we decide to cross the Nile via the Neshmet, just as the mythology tells us, if we open up this rather ill-fitting trapezium that we find within the constellation of Orion to the rabbit's head, we find a star that is called the Neshmet. So we have the cosmic barge in the sky. So if we decide to ask Osiris somewhat to set foot upon this cosmic barge, excuse me, and join with his legs, with his feet, the head of the rabbit and Alpha Leporis, which is the brightest star within that particular constellation, we then open up what is described in science as the benzene ring for the correct molecular structure for DMT. And even more surprising is that we find out that Osiris's trip across the Nile is also described here as well, because we have the second brightest star within this constellation, still part of the rabbit's head, which is called Nile, which is spelled Nihal, which I'll get to in a moment. Because what we find out, if we join these proverbial dots, we create serotonin in the sky. Now, serotonin, as I'm sure you're aware, is produced by the third eye, or the pineal gland, the epiphysis cerebri, during daylight hours, which is secreted in order for us to have an overriding feeling of wellness, of joyfulness. And what we actually find is that Nile translates as joyfulness. So that, I think what they're trying to do is nudge us in the right direction to understanding the nuts and bolts of the chemical makeup of what may well be going on within our brains, within our minds. And I don't know if I'm going to digress
So
too
you
much.
think, so you think the origin of the story comes from the sky?
I think the origin of the story is an understanding of what the molecular structure of DMT, albeit serotonin as well, looks like. But I believe that they've utilized a cosmic counterpart that just so happens, literally just so. I mean, I couldn't place the stars in a more perfect position in the night sky.
But who named it? Who named it Nile? For instance?
Who named it? Nobody knows. Nobody knows. I mean, that goes back thousands of years, and that's actually a name that's known throughout ancient Sanskrit writings as well. It's actually also loosely termed as a female name in ancient Hindi, and again, it means joyfulness. So I think when we start connecting all these, I guess, proverbial dots, you have to take it somewhat more serious with regards to what our ancestors may or may not have been trying to get across. And I think this makes a lot more sense at the moment, as opposed to a deified entity died, was confined within a tree, was rescued from that tree, became synonymous with the sap of that tree, was murdered at the hands of his brother, became a constellation, and became synonymous with that constellation. The end, no more. To me, that doesn't make a world of sense. But if we look at this through, I guess, a more scientific lens, like what I'm sort of explaining on screen here, I think there becomes a far more apparent story available to people like ourselves that understand what these molecular structures may or may not be with regards to the human experience. Because if you're going to take this time to build a mythology, it has to have some overriding justification to the human experience in order for them to want it to be remembered, you know? Yeah, why go to such an extent to remember a guy was locked inside a tree, rescued by his wife, and became a constellation? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. Why would you even want to remember that? It makes no sense whatsoever. But again, this mythology appears to continue because, okay, Isis in the night sky, it gets a little crazy. I won't touch on this. This is all in the books. Excuse me, but if we decide to marry Osiris with his wife in the sky, we actually get psilocybin in the sky as well, and we find that the temple of Isis at Philae in ancient Egypt as well, the pillars, for want of better description, appear to depict magic mushrooms as well, which is obviously where we extract psilocybin from. And there's a lot of
So this all interconnectedness, this relationship from below to above, does get me two possible answers. One, that is all a very sort of reality concept that we are presented, and we are missing the communication that has been given on the sky, for instance, in regard to this aspect. And the second one is, how long has this constellation remained on this form? I ask because I know that, for instance, Robert Duvall tried to put the 3 pyramids with the 3 stars on the belt of Orion, and he had to measure how long that happened in a way for them to align.
Sure.
Have you wondered how long does this constellation has this form?
This constellation would have looked like this for millions of years.
Millions of years?
Millions of years. Yeah, I mean, they were said, well, I mean, let's say hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years. Stars die, stars are born, but they in.
Yeah, but stars move. Stars are moving like the sun is moving across the galaxy.
Sure.
Perspective
No, I
changes.
understand that. But with regards to precession and how we move across the elliptical plane over a period of literally hundreds of thousands of years, they're going to move microscopically, albeit they are moving. It would take millions and millions and millions of years for them to literally dissipate and break what we maybe might even call the signs of the zodiac or what have you. And like I say, stars die.
Because if I remember, Robert Duvall placed that connection right on.
And I think that is, I think
what
that
today
is
we believe it's the Younger Dryas.
Yeah, and I think that is very prevalent. I think that is part of this same mystery as well. I think that is why the pyramids have been, let's say, aligned to the belt stars of Orion. I mean, crikey, we might be getting on for time. I don't know how you're fixed for time, but with regards to the pyramid itself, I'm sure that you're aware of, I mean, everything about it seems to dictate the notion of light in itself, you know. It's dedicated to Amun-Ra, the god of light. You look down on it from above at the equinox. It's not just a four-sided edifice. It's 8 concave that look like what we theorize a cross-section of a photon of light, or like the Templar's cross. Excuse me. If you draw a perimeter line around the base plate of the Great Pyramid and subtract that from, if you draw a circle round inside the base perimeter and subtract it from a circle drawn around the base perimeter, we come out of the speed of light. The longitudinal coordinates for the Great Pyramid are somewhat equal to the speed of light. Even the latitude, if we divide the latitude 31.31, I can't remember off the top of my head, but if we divide that by 360, we're talking about the planet Earth. That actually comes out to 864. 864. We have 864,000 miles is the diameter of the sun. You know, everything about this whole edifice appears to be pushing us rather violently in a direction of a notion of light. You know, and again, the pineal gland that secretes this, like, I mean, it's science hasn't got the tools at its disposal at the moment to literally nail down where DMT is secreted or created within the human brain. But there are large pointers right now saying it's probably going to be the pineal gland. And the pineal gland is the light receptor of the body as well. And it seems to share a number of mythologies that have been documented through Christian scripture with regards to when thine eye be single, XYZ. Again, I can wax lyrical about these numbers, biblical scriptures for hours, but again, it's all in the book. But the nuts and bolts of what I'm trying to get across is that there appears to be a far more essential understanding to the human experience to why the pyramids may have been aligned to the belt stars of Orion, why we have one of their most deified and celebrated gods of resurrection that is synonymous with this constellation and the belt stars of Orion. It's all to do with resurrection. And we find that once Osiris has already cross the Nile with this rabbit's head that makes no sense. It makes no sense. But then he becomes deified again and becomes synonymous. Basically, he becomes assimilated as Sahu, and Sahu is described as the father or the grandfather of the gods, but he's also known as the hidden one. And we know that DMT is hidden within the acacia, or albeit the lifeblood of Osiris or the acacia. He's also known as the incorruptible soul. And anyone that's had a DMT experience or an ayahuasca experience will tell you, hands down, no problem. They won't beat around the bush. They will tell you that no matter what they believed in, that after this life is up, this is just a whistle-stop tour. We're part of the cosmos. There's something after this. This soul is incorruptible. We are incorruptible souls. We are bodies of light. We're human beings, as in hue, a hue of light, you know? And even stranger still, he's described as the beautiful renewal. And beautiful renewal is wonderful for the archaeologists because they say it's the flooding of the Nile Valley again. But we find out that science tells us today that DMT renews, or at least kickstarts, neurogenesis within the human brain for dying blood cells, for stroke victims, for dementia victims. It's a wonderful, it's almost a gift from the gods, let's say, that has been
given in hospitals and healthcare centers and everywhere.
Absolutely. And within the next
No, it
5 to
isn't.
10
It isn't. I'm sorry, I'm wrong. It isn't.
Within the next 5 to 10 years, there'll be like EpiPens in ambulances for people that have suffered stroke. That's literally going to go bam. They like let's renew these dying blood cells. You know, we have the technology to do it, but it's via a chemical compound that is littered throughout nature, and like the animal kingdom. It's created in our brains, our bodies, our lungs. The act of breathing is a psychedelic experience. You know, it's like, damn, we're illegal. We're essentially illegal. It's crazy. But it appears that the ancient Egyptians were privy to, like, Nabi's Ashaninka, Amazon basin bound shamans that were privy to what this thing looked like. And what could be more amazing, or a gift to give future generations of humanity an understanding of a resurrection. It's like a resurrection code, you know. If you die before you die, you won't actually die when you die. You'll understand. Do you know what I mean? You will understand that there's something far more powerful, far more rewarding, uplifting, a place than just this somewhat mundane three-dimensional reality that you come back to after a DMT experience. You're trying to explain the nuts and bolts of reality that you were just privy to 5 minutes before. That is incomprehensible, so incomprehensible, it's unbelievable. That the ancient Egyptians have understood this, recognized something within the cosmos that shares probably 98% commonalities with a molecular structure of something that is so significant to the human experience that they've built a plethora of mythologies that are going to stand the test of time. Because if you want to talk about the grey matter and the secretion of DMT throughout the endocrine system and such receptors, you're not going to remember that. No one's going to remember that. You won't remember that one generation to another, let alone 5,000 years. 10,000 years, whatever it may or may not be with regards to the chronology of ancient Egypt. But a hero's journey where you have somebody that's resurrected from within this particular variety that has a number, or an overriding number, of commonalities with a resurrection process that seems to take place when you have a free-base breakthrough DMT experience. As far as I'm concerned, I've died before, you know, and I'm quite happy and content. I don't want to die now, crikey. I'm not going to burn out and fade away. I want to live to 100, 110 years old, what have you. I want a long, fine and mighty life, but I'm no longer afraid of dying. I think DMT has evaporated or obliterated my fear of what's next, you know. I can't again compartmentalize and say this is what's next. But I'm now happy and very content in my mind, knowing that there's something else that I might not be able to describe or even comprehend somewhat, but I know that I've been there now, and I think that I'll be going back there should I get hit by a bus crossing the road tomorrow.
And they're not alone, because a lot of people that have had experiences with DMT report exactly the same thing, right? Which is kind of this dissolution of the fear of dying. And I just wanted to mention very quickly for a point that we were talking about just a few moments ago.
Sure.
There's currently active research on the use of small doses of DMT to treat various types of conditions for cluster headaches.
Yeah.
They sometimes can call them ciliary neuralgia. It's it's one of the most painful diseases in the world. People with cluster headaches have a very hard time functioning in society because if they get one of those headaches, it's a 10 out of 10 or 11 out of 10 in the scale of pain, on the pain threshold, right? And there's been meta-analysis that have been made. There's been various studies, namely from the Wally Research Institute and other organizations that have tried to administer small quantities of DMT to this
Microdosing,
and they've found a lot of that the pain can be reduced to up to 90% if kept into a regular cycle. Basically, they use DMT for when the kind of headache pain episode is starting. They take the DMT, and there's of course this reality shattering moment, but at the same time the pain is subverted to a minimum bearable threshold, right? Other ways of all the research has also been done with psilocybin mushrooms. They found that they actually help a lot when taken not as a response to the headache, but as a regular microdosing activity. They bring the rate of the episodes down quite drastically. And I think that's super interesting.
Absolutely. We find the research is now suggesting that people that are not so much microdose, but are having I'll loosely term it as a breakthrough or a full-on psilocybin experience for the terminally ill, that after the initial, they're guided through it like a trip sitter, a wingman, whatever you want to call it, a professional practice to reassure them that everything's okay. But you have these guys that are they're psychologically exhausted because of the fear of dying. They don't want to die. They're attached to this reality, to their loved ones, and so they should be, rightly so. But after having a guided psilocybin experience, which is only one molecular tweak away from being DMT, it's not that different. It's essentially, it's almost the same thing. That once they've had this experience, no one's happy to die, but they're content in the understanding that, hey, there's something more. This right here, this is the ride. This here, we've almost won the lottery coming to Earth and having this experience as a human being in a three-dimensional meat suit realm of reality. But yeah, I would put the affidavits of these mentally, not mentally, these critically ill patients that are literally on death's doorstep, having that rush in under half a day. There's no kind of you're not going to be taken to some psych ward for believing this, that, and the other. But everybody's coming back from this essential same experience saying, you know what, I don't want to die, but right now, don't worry about me. I know I'm going to be fine. And how much more fulfilling can that be to people that are about to lose a loved one? if you're about to lose your mother, your father, your parent, your son, your daughter, whoever it may be, whoever's close to you, but you've now got them saying, don't worry about me. I'm privy to an experience whereby I don't think you should worry. You know, I don't want to die, but hey, I don't think it's the end. And what a gift that is for someone that's dying, you know, that's on the threshold of, having this mortal mindscape just ripped away from them. You've gone from fade to black yesterday to I've just ingested psilocybin and I've been guided through this. And right now, cracky, don't worry about me. I think I'm going to be fine. You know, don't worry about me when I'm gone. Yeah, you can. You're going to miss me. You're going to miss me. But hey, who knows? We might meet again. I mean, that's where my mind is. And considering 20 years ago, at least 15 years ago, prior to trying to understand what DMT is all about, I would have laughed at myself if I would have had a future kind of screenshot of a quote of me saying, dude, I'm happy. I think there's something else, because no way, until I had that proverbial t-shirt or kind of walk the walk, if you know what I mean, I wouldn't have believed it. And I wouldn't expect anyone to take my word for it. I mean, I'm not promoting saying go out and have a DMT experience, mushrooms experience. You're your own person, you do what you want to do. I'm not promoting anything, but from my research and the experience that I've had, I tell you what, I haven't stepped on a fly. I love, nothing winds me up anymore. You know, there's some really shitty, horrible people out there, but hey, come on, I think they can change as well. I even think there's hope for them.
That's a beautiful message.
That is the message I think that the ancients were trying to get to us. If you understand this world, this experience could be amazing. It can be amazing. And it's not the end of it.
Don't take it personally.
No,
this is not about you or me. So
I've fallen out with so many researchers along ancient research and alternative history and psychedelic research. It's almost innumerable, and it's such a shame. It really is. And I don't dislike them. I mean, they might think I'm an absolute arsehole, but okay, maybe you might if these people become privy to the experience that myself and other people that have had this DMT or even psilocybin experience, I think that there's room for everyone to change. I genuinely believe that.
Look, Bill Hicks has this small sketch where people are stuck in traffic, and because a guy is stopped on the road, and everyone behind starts buzzing the horns and calling him names and so on, and then finally, with the commotion, one of them gets out of the car and goes to the fellow that was stopping the traffic. He says, "What do you think you're doing?" And he grabs the joint, sticks it in his mouth, and says, "Smoke it." Guy smokes it. He gives it back, and then he says, "What were you saying?" "I don't know. I really don't care anymore. How are you?"
Exactly. But the frustrating thing in my area of research is that even in the country that I live in now as well, things as harmless as, I mean, cracky, it's on the NHS, cannabis, marijuana, you know, all these things that have been demonized pretty much my entire lifetime turn out to be, man, everyone was wrong, you know. And at the moment, I mean, even prior to even DMT, psilocybin, or cannabis being legalized, first of all, I'd rather it was not demonized so much. You know, the stigma needs to be kind of really quashed. And like Bill Hicks, what a wonderful mind. You don't hear on the news about crikey. I used to keep a bit of an arm's length with regards to ecstasy. Oh, it's going to kill you. We had a few deaths in the UK and this, that, and the other. But it's only the one death every blue moon that you hear about, and that's because it wasn't pure. It wasn't right. It wasn't the right grade MDMA. You know,
Sure.
you don't hear about the 1.2 million kids that are out doing the same thing in nightclubs that have literally in love with everyone around them. Do you know what I mean? There was no, even back in the day at raves, there were no fights that I was seeing because everyone was literally tripping their balls on MDMA. They loved everyone, and all they wanted to do was dance. But it was demonized.
I would use a phrase from a Portuguese theater piece that is, people now use drugs to drug themselves, and it isn't supposed to be like that. Yeah. You should use the drugs in a clever way, in a controlled environment.
Absolutely.
I don't recommend to take MDMA or whatever kind substance and go to how does it call Guy? How the name of trance, to listen to punch when you are with your senses all expanded by the psychotropic that you just taken. That's why I see so many guys with my age now that are completely flipped because the brain just because it was not the drug but the setting. I don't blame the drug, I blame the setting and 100%. perhaps the abuse of the drug,
and
but
the intent.
100%.
Because drugs are something that everyone should experience within certain types of drugs, but in a controlled environment, in a situation as free of stress as possible. Because if you're going to take DMT and you are going to have a near-death experience, you don't want to have it with some kind of strange music or in crowded environments. So you want to have someone with you. You want to have complete confidence in what you're doing. Inform yourself. Try if the drug are actually for you or not, because not every drug is for everyone to have a good experience. There are people that reject some, people that reject others. But I just want to conclude with the positive thing, that is, it's no coincidence, after all you told us, it's no coincidence then that the Egyptian people were careless about dying. They had absolute confidence in something higher than the existence that they had, that they would depart to somewhere else. It's their belief, apparently, for everyone. So perhaps everyone had that experience of DMT within their culture at some point when these myths and all this was created. So
yeah, and to highlight for a culture that's gone to such lengths to get across the afterlife, the other world, there's something more.
Exactly.
For us not to read into the mythology, like I believe my research is, with more of a scientific lens, as opposed to guy was stuck in a tree, rescued, chopped up, constellation, makes no sense. Yeah, for a society that has the prowess to construct something like the Great Pyramid, that again we couldn't recreate today, we still have no real underlying idea of what its main purpose is. I'm sure it was rehoused or reused as a tomb, no problem, I get that, get on with it, but please don't try and sell me that was what its function was, you know. But a society that is capable of creating something like that, that stands the test of time, literally in the crosshairs of all landmass throughout the, I mean, it goes on and on and on, and I know you're privy to it, and I won't bore you with it. I mean, we can revisit this podcast and do another couple of hours with the rest of us. I've got no problem doing that. But to say that the guys that built the pyramid are the same guys that are saying a guy was stuck in a tree, killed up there, let's remember that mythology. Nah, there's something far more fundamental to humanity regarding that particular mythology. And I think the 21st century science is just about starting to knock on the door and ask questions about this chemical, this molecular structure that we produce in our brains, that we might not even have a cohesive sense of three-dimensional grounding reality without it. I genuinely think that a society that can create something like the Great Pyramid has got an understanding of something like this. And what more enlightening and inspiring a civilization can you want to give future generations of humanity than the keys to what's next, what this might be about, and
what's the meaning of life?
Absolutely.
Rick, this has been a beautiful, intriguing conversation. Is there anything you would like to talk about? Maybe you want to plug in your social media and let us know what you're working on now.
It's been an absolute pleasure. I sincerely appreciate the invitation, gents. It's
if you can show your books, I'm sure you have them there.
Yeah, I've got these here. I usually up and down, go for a number of pages. I mean, there's so many different things. That this is the first one, Spirit in the Sky. That was what I thought was going to be the mic drop.
We're going to put a links for all of them. They're all on Amazon, right?
Thank you. We have Deities, Myth and Triptamines, and then the latest of them all, Searching for Osiris and the Tree of Life. But yeah, no, I appreciate if you just pop the links in there, and yeah, instead of me plugging like that, I'll just plug the links that you're doing when you put this out into the ether for the rest of everyone to kind of pick the buns out of. But what I would say is, let's not be strangers. Let's do this again, because realistically, the conversation that we've had today, it's been enlightening, it's been educational. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, but we've barely touched the surface about what a lot of books are about with regards to what was going on, globally 5,000, 6,000 years ago. Because like I say, they all appear to be singing off the same proverbial hymn sheet and pointing us and nudging us in the right direction to say, look, if you understand this, you guys might understand yourself. And if you understand that, what greater gift, you know?
Exactly. The answers is within, not without.
Gods reside inside us.
Don't go away. Thank you very much, everyone, for being with us. We had a great time. So until our next episode, thank you very much.